Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies. What you been listening to this week, man?
What have we listened to? Well, I've been on a bit of a New York hardcore binge this month, really. So I've been listening to Marauder quite a lot, and Sick of It All, Madball, and then some other hardcore bands like Gorilla Biscuits and Strife and Indecision. I've been listening to a lot of Indecision. But then you've got to mellow out sometimes. So I've been listening to a bit of Boards of Canada, bits of Skinny Puppy, stuff like that. So it's always nice to have a bit of an eclectic mix. What about yourself?
Been digging back into some old skate punk and listening to No Fun at All.
Oh, good stuff.
I used to love them. I used to have a tape, and it had them on both sides. And so, I found them on Spotify, and I was like, oh my God. Started listening to them over and over and over and over again.
Oh, fantastic.
But what I've been watching, man, I've been watching this Legion, like an X-Men TV series thing, and it's like a demon possesses a mutant, and it's sick, man. Crazy.
It's good.
Yeah.
I've not heard of that. I've been watching the Dharma thing, the monster. I'm about 5 episodes into that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't started that one yet.
Might be like, it's good though. It's tense. It's very, very like the way it's shot and everything, and the way the narrative sort of plays out.
Yeah,
it's really good at sort of making the hairs stick up on the back of your neck, so to speak.
Yeah, all my serial killer friends. Well, not serial killer friends, but friends that like to read about serial killers are loving this one.
Apparently, it's quite accurate.
So let's introduce our guest. We have got a freelance writer and filmmaker, Dylan Reeve. Dylan, how you doing, mate?
Hey guys, I'm great, and have nowhere near that level of musical knowledge to offer anything like that. Nothing remotely similar.
What sort of music do you like, Dylan?
No, I just listen to whatever's on my wife's Spotify playlist, which is pretty all over the place. Yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. I'm sure it's all been top 40 pop at some point.
All right, you are the director of a film called Tickled, and you've got a new book coming out.
Yeah, well, the movie is a bit old now. It came out in 2016. It's called Tickled. I don't know. I think you'll probably find it on
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Amazon Prime. There you go. It's on Amazon Prime and the old iTunes stores, things like that, and also in the illicit places on the internet that people look for things like that sort of. But the more recent project for me is a book on conspiracy theory, which is what brought you into my orbit. I actually interviewed you for that.
Mm-hmm.
My book is sort of focused more on New Zealand, which is where I sort of live and pay attention to these things. But as you well know, the nature of conspiracy theory is not bound by geographic boundaries. So I'm certainly talking about and thinking about things well outside of my own nation.
It's called Fake Believe.
Yeah, Fake Believe. Subtitle sort of conspiracy theory in Aotearoa.
So what's the angle of the book then?
Yeah, that's a bit hard. I'm about to have to do publicity for it, so I should probably actually get this under control. What is the angle of the book? I think what it isn't is like a deep dive into what is and isn't true about any given conspiracy theory. I'm not trying to debunk anything, or not that I'm not trying to debunk things, but that's not the point of the book. It's more about thinking about where conspiracy theory is at the moment, what sort of impact it's having in New Zealand, why people believe the things they do. I guess I was mostly writing it with sort of a thing in mind where, because a lot of people I know that I've been interested in this for a long time, in the past few years, when maybe some friends of theirs on Facebook have started posting some weird shit, my friends have come to me and been like, hey, what's this about? And so I think the gist of the book is essentially trying to help people understand what this is about.
Right.
Be it George Soros or Bill Gates or vaccines or I don't know, weather modification. Just the regular stuff that pops up in your uncle's Facebook feed.
Yeah, or my Facebook feed.
Or your Facebook feed, yeah. So that's the main idea, is just to try and help people sort of get an understanding, get their heads around it.
Yeah, sounds fascinating. That sounds really, really great. Like, so how did you decide to get into that then?
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing I hadn't really thought about until I started actually writing the book. Is sort of when I developed an interest in conspiracy theory. And if I think back to it, I think it pretty much happened. I mean, so I'm in my early 40s. So I was, 21 when a couple of planes crashed into the Twin Towers in New York.
Hmm.
And I was a very internet person at that stage of my life. I am still. But I watched a lot of that unfold on online web forums, places like Metafilter. I don't know if you remember Metafilter, but there was an incredible sort of live updating comment thread on Metafilter that probably stretched to hundreds or thousands of comments by the end of the day of people just sharing their experiences and what they'd seen. And because, like websites like CNN.com were just collapsing under the pressure of what was happening, I watched a lot of that unfold on the internet in real time. And then a couple of years later, I suppose, I, for whatever reason, was enjoying what I would have called at the time debate on the internet, but
Yeah.
really I was just arguing with people. Um, and I was arguing with people about whatever. I thought I was pretty smart. So I was arguing with people about religion and politics and other shit that I didn't really know a lot about. And then increasingly, people started bringing conspiracy theory ideas and mostly 9/11 stuff at that stage. So like 2003, 2004, I was starting to sort of hear popular 9/11 conspiracy theories online where I was hanging out. And I've just I don't know what it is. I have what I would describe as like a reasonably well attuned bullshit detector. And so a lot of that stuff when I first encountered it, just like I was like, nah, that's shit. That's not right. That's like it literally doesn't make sense. And I would argue with people about it, and I'd do my research, my research, not their research. I'd go off and find out, well, was there actually debris on the lawn of the Pentagon? And it turns out actually there was quite a lot, shit like that. And so I'd argue with people online about it, and then I just kept doing that for a long time, just sort of watching and arguing and thinking and talking. Um, yeah, and then I think I did that all the way up until I was participating in online forums like on Reddit and some other places above top secret stuff like that. Um, a lot of reading, occasionally engaging, and always it was even as someone who was like openly skeptical of conspiracy theories, there were a lot of people who were willing to engage and chat and debate and share ideas and be quite upfront about it. And it was,
Mm.
it for the most part felt like um, good banter.
Yeah.
I don't know, like people were. It was interesting, if nothing else. Like, no, I don't think anyone's mind got changed. Like, I didn't start believing the Twin Towers were bombed, and they didn't start believing that 19 Saudi hijackers flew the planes into the buildings and a passport survived. Like
Mm.
that stuff. No one changed any minds, but we shared a lot of ideas. And I think in 2015, I reckon, or maybe even I was pretty much around 2015, the tone online really started to change. And there were two things I think that were happening around that time. One was the Sandy Hook shooting,
Yes.
and a real strong embrace of false flag narratives. And the second was Donald Trump
Yes.
running for office in the States, and sort of the weird 4chan lulls campaign that turned into a real political campaign that turned into massive conspiracy theory focus. And at that point, I found the conspiracy community, whatever form that takes, I found it not fun to participate in anymore, and increasingly it got like harmful, I would say, in a way that it maybe wasn't before.
I think you're right. I noticed that as well. There was a shift from, like you were saying before, banter, and it's all right to disagree with somebody,
Yeah.
like to all of a sudden just like taking sides and slinging mud at each other. And if you don't believe exactly what I believe, then you must be 77th Brigade or MI5 or in the pocket of George Soros or any of those ridiculous tropes.
Yeah, and it was it stopped being. I described it to people. I describe it probably in my book as it stopped being fun.
Mm.
And then it got to the point. There were things like the Las Vegas shooting, the Boston bombing, Boston Marathon bombing, and like in any of those occasions, you just knew that within seconds there was going to be. It was immediately definitely a false flag.
Yep.
maybe no one died. Some of the victims are crisis actors, and then you've got people, doxing victims and victims' families, and it just like the whole thing turned into a really much less pleasant thing to engage with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There was a real shift in the sort of conspiracy world from all of a sudden examining things to every event has somebody that must be persecuted, be it like, as I say, the crisis actors, or be it people who are involved in Black Lives Matter, or, all of a sudden, or trans activists, or gay people, or drag queens. Like, all of a sudden, every conspiracy theory has to have a group that is being attacked rather than sort of like an event that's being examined. And it's just, yeah, there was a very definite tonal shift.
Yeah, and I don't know that I fully understand why that's happened. I guess I used to try and explain to people that conspiracy theories weren't political in the sense that
Hmm.
it was almost like people got deep enough down into conspiracy theories, they kind of almost wrapped around. They went a little bit left and then further left and then further left, and then suddenly they were on the right.
Yeah.
Just by following the conspiracy theories, and then they'd kind of swoop back through again or something. But now, I mean, it certainly appears to have taken a much more dramatic shift to the right or conservative politics or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, and so like I set out to try and understand that a little bit for myself when I was writing the book, just to kind of get a better sense. And the other thing that that really fascinates me when I sort of stop to think about it is, and I think I talked to you about this, Brent, was why the people who are going into these spaces, who are sort of, and like COVID-19 was like a really wild time, I suppose, for people to stumble into conspiracy spaces because they were legitimately a bit worried about some stuff that was freaking them out, and the information
Totally.
that they were finding um, that resonated with them was deep down what was leading them towards some deep rabbit holes. The thing that I never understood, and that I've spoken to a bunch of people about, like people who are in this space who've believed these things through COVID-19, who are like people who were not really in the conspiracy space before COVID, and then got into it either through like doubting the virus itself, or more commonly through concerns about vaccines, which maybe they didn't have prior to COVID. Like they weren't really worried about the MMR and all the others, but somehow the COVID vaccine freaked them out more.
Mm.
And the thing that I never understood was like that I watch people go into these spaces, and I'm in a lot of these spaces. Like I'm watching a lot of these spaces. I was doing journalism around this stuff, and people go into these spaces, worried about a vaccine or a virus, and then suddenly there are people talking to them about the deep state and white hats and QAnon and
Yeah.
shit, and I'm just like, and then once the Ukraine thing started, there's people talking about how Russia's the good guy and Ukraine's the bad guy,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, how are
Mm.
you coming into this like a bit worried about a vaccine, seeing all of this other shit playing out, and not going, oh, maybe I've stepped in the wrong room?
Well, yeah.
But none of them seem to be.
Well, it's because of the community and the psychological comfort. I mean, like,
Yeah.
basically, if you go into there like terrified that there's a virus or whatever, like I've said this a few times. Okay, people are scared of uncertainty, and people didn't cope well with like a world like pandemic. And it's far easier, it's far more psychologically comforting to go that either A, this is a plot against me, or B, that some bloke on the internet said viruses don't exist, so this virus doesn't exist, than actually cope with the uncertainty of, I don't know whether I'm going to catch it, I don't know whether I'm going to be forced to get some medicine that I don't want to have, I don't know whether my auntie's going to die, I don't know any of this sort of stuff. So people tend to gravitate towards people that are given a solution. It doesn't even have to be a good solution, but if their brain can wrap it around, it's one less problem that you have to deal with that day, so you just sort of store it away.
Yeah.
The problem is that basically, if somebody's dealt you sort of some advice that's allowed you to deal with something as massive as like COVID, and then they'll tell you something else, you have a tendency to believe them, because basically they've already, A, these are your new friends, and you've got that lovely new sort of like group of interesting people to chat to, and B, basically there's all sorts of other things that they can give you comfort about. Oh, all politics is rigged, is it? Oh, brilliant! Right, that means I don't have to worry about voting or taking any notice of legislation. I'll just let it all wash over me because everything's planned.
I was going to say that was a user story that I imagined long before COVID. I was talking about because I sort of wrote a treatment for a documentary series that I wanted to produce, like 2016 probably. And one of the things I wanted to explore there, and I still haven't seen a really good exploration of this, was this idea about how people got into it in that way. And at that time, I was imagining the sort of the user case that I imagined, and I've since spoken to someone who's kind of followed this path, is essentially they were, I was imagining like a new mum or a new parent confronted with, a list of vaccines that their child was going to have in the first 3 months of life or whatever, and being rightfully a bit freaked out by that because there's quite a lot, especially when you see it all printed in the list. And, going looking for the truth, I did the air quotes, around, or a capital T, maybe I did a capital T, who knows, around vaccines, and stumbling on a website like Natural News or something like that, and then having that website sort of reinforced, or whatever community it is, a Facebook group, having that reinforced as a place you can trust from that point, because they told me the truth about this thing.
Yeah.
Then when I go back there and I learn about shape-shifting reptiles, then I presumably they must be onto something because they were telling me the truth about that. That's a user story I imagine, but I can't find. And I went looking for it quite a lot when I was writing the book. I can't find any sort of studies that follow that idea, and I'm a little bit surprised and disappointed. But I feel like it feels truthy to me that that's what happens. Yeah.
Well, we've got a whole series of anecdotes and hearsay and conjecture, if you want, which is types of evidence. Like
yeah, absolutely.
But I've witnessed personally that path, like absolutely 100%. And just to sort of go back to your previous point as well, with the sort of the advent of the right wing, I think that happened. Like, I think it's no doubt it happened because Alex Jones went from saying publicly, left wing and right wing, saying wings of the same bird, I'm completely politically neutral and blah blah blah, and attacking George W. Bush. Then all of a sudden it just decided that it's the Democrats that are the problem. And he's a leader of the field. So when people, when he speaks, people listen. Basically, tie that in with this concept that Trump was like a savior, and then QAnon and all this, and Pizzagate and all this nonsense.
Yeah, I think Pizzagate and QAnon had a massive part to do with it because they were very solidly focused on the Democrats as being, and it's so stupid. Like you guys are in the UK and I'm in New Zealand, and neither of us, we're not in the US, and none of this should fucking matter to us. But because there's no geographic boundaries in this, half the in fact, pretty much all of the New Zealand conspiracy Telegram groups that I'm a part of or whatever are constantly sharing American QAnon bullshit, and I'm like, anyway. They're all coming here. There's tunnels between Australia and Samoa and New Zealand, apparently, that they traffic children through. The big volcanic eruption that was it in Tonga? I think the Tongan volcanic eruption last year apparently was actually a deep underground military base being exploded. So there you go.
Wow, when you say it like that, it makes so much sense.
It really does. Yep.
But wow, fair enough then. Another thing that there was a shift was because what strangely to tie it again to the right is that a lot of the false flags, say the Christchurch shooting and various other sorts of things, were carried out by avowed white supremacists.
Yeah,
and then the conspiracy trope theory, whatever you want to call it, was that these blokes weren't actually to blame. So all of a sudden, within the conspiracy world, somebody's trying to frame extreme neo-Nazis as bad guys, and with your sort of genius sort of conspiratorial brain, you'll work out that the opposite must be true, that crazed neo-Nazi bad guys must actually be the good guys, because otherwise why would the news be criticizing them?
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way.
But yeah, ridiculous. Well, it doesn't. It's ridiculous, but it explains it certainly. So
yeah.
But can we quickly talk about your film Tickle? Because I thought it was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we absolutely can.
Just to sort of explain it, you've stumbled across an internet thing where people are being, were they being paid initially, or was it just the competition of extreme tickle endurance?
Competitive endurance tickling, as you well know, is a sport, a legitimate sport for heterosexual men to restrain each other on a bed and tickle one another. For the thing that always got me, so the story begins, and it begins in reality, and it begins in the film, that my friend David, who worked for a TV news station here in New Zealand, happened to see a Facebook ad for, I don't know, like attractive athletic men for an international competition, athletics competition or something, and it was, you follow the link and it takes you to this website about competitive endurance tickling, and you're going to get free flights from New Zealand to the US to Los Angeles. You're going to get put up in a fancy hotel. You're going to participate in this competition. I think maybe there was prize money on offer. You're going to get a photo shoot with a professional photographer. Like if you're, let's say, 19 to 25, a hot himbo, like, yeah, shit, it appeals. Why not? Go and get tickled for a couple of hours. Who cares? For a free flight to LA, like, sweet. And the hotel, they put them up. It was nice. Like, it's all good. Anyway, it turns out that when you look at it that way, it kind of seems a bit weird. And if you're a news journalist who makes stories about weird shit, which is what he does, or was doing at the time, he sort of emailed them and went, "Hey, this thing you're doing sounds wild, and I'd love to do a story about it. Like, competitive a tickling competition. Like, that would make a great stupid TV news story." He was doing the story like, the late news. I don't know if you have this in the UK, but I assume you do. You have the late news, and at the end of the late news, like the last couple of stories on the bulletin are some stupid human interest weirdness.
Here's a dog that can play cricket or something.
Perfect. Yep. Here's exactly that stuff. Here's a donkey that thinks it's people. So he wanted to do that story, and he contacted them on their Facebook page, and the response he got back was, "We don't want to have anything to do with a homosexual journalist."
Wow.
And David's bisexual. It doesn't matter, but that from the very beginning was like, that's fucking weird. And so in real time, this is unfolding, and I see this post from David about, like, this is a fucking strange thing that's just happened, and I start digging into it, and he starts digging into it, and we're exchanging messages. And then it just gets kind of wild. We start to sort of, we post a few, like, blog posts about it, about the sort of investigation we're doing and our theories about what's really going on. And we learn some things, and we speak to some people, and then, and then suddenly we've got lawyers threatening us, like American lawyers threatening us with defamation lawsuits and giving us friendly advice to stop getting involved. And so obviously we did the thing that made sense to us, which was we started making a documentary.
Clearly, yeah.
At that point, you thought, right, press record.
Yeah, I'd grab the cameras, let's go. And that documentary is Tickled, essentially. And so, yeah, it turns out, I mean, not to be too spoilery about it, but it's been a few years, so, you've got no one to blame but yourself. I suppose if you really don't want spoilers, you could pause now and go find the film on Amazon. But, yeah, spoilers, it's not really an athletic competition. It's actually just some fucking rich perv who wants to see videos of guys tickling each other. Like, normal shit. And it plays out. It's a weird story, and it's there's twists and turns, and like there's shit in the film where we were just like, what the fuck? Like in the actual, you don't really see it in the film, but the production process took 2 stages. Like, we did a Kickstarter to start making the film. We did a Kickstarter, and we just chased the story like really quickly. Like, they sent some guys to New Zealand to negotiate with us, but actually to intimidate us. And we basically followed them back to LA. Like, they left, and we went like 3 days later, and turned up at one of their tickling shoots. And we thought we knew what the story was. Like, we'd found some people. We traveled around the States for a couple of weeks. We spoke to some people who'd been through this experience and stuff like that. And then we came back to New Zealand, and we were like, we do not have the story. Because we spoke to people and we learned more while we were there, but we were running out of time and money. So we came back and we were like, we need to go back. We need to do this better, and we need to find all of these other people. And so at that point, I went through a whole process of, we basically refactored the film, figured out what we needed to do differently, got more funding, got a bit more professional about the whole process, and went back and did more of it, and did it again, did some of it again, did more of it. Yeah, and it was like, the process was like kind of like mind destroying at times. Like, we were convinced we were being followed by private investigators. Like, we were doing evasive driving and things to try and get away from people that probably weren't really there, but who knows. And we were talking to people who were giving us warnings, and stuff was going, we were finding out about like cases in the past that had involved the Secret Service and the FBI, and it was wild. anyway, we made the film. The film came out. We premiered it at Sundance. We sold the film to HBO and a company called Magnolia, who's like a film distributor in the States. And it had a theatrical opening in the US, so we went back to the US and did like Q&A screenings and stuff. And we did this whole launch, and we were doing it, because the US it exists in two places. You can exist in New York or LA. There's apparently other places in the US, but whatever. So we did simultaneous kind of screening, Q&A screening, because there were two directors. Me and David co-directed it. So David was doing Q&A screenings in New York, and I flew out to LA, and I was doing them in LA. And then I'm doing a screening with a Q&A, and I'm in the cinema before the film starts. I just happened to get there early, and I see, the main protagonists of the film, or antagonists, I suppose, of the film walking into the cinema for the beginning of the screening. Like, oh shit, something's about to go down.
So this is the rich guy that's been paying people to get tickled on camera and then harassing them afterwards.
Yeah. And his handlers and some of the guys who'd been tickled, like there was just a bunch of people went into the film, and I'm like, shit, I've got like 90 minutes to get a crew here and film whatever's about to go down, because something's about to go down. And so then that whole thing happened. That then forms the basis of another, like a 25-minute sort of mini sequel. We never got satisfactory answers, I don't think. If there's one thing about the film that frustrates me as the maker of the film, is that there's no conclusions. I mean, sometimes, often in life there isn't. So be it. Like, we never find any real solid conclusions. But and we'll never get to, because unfortunately the guy died. He had a big heart attack and died, and so I mean, the people who'd been the reason we made the film was because the process that this company, Jane O'Brien Media, and the person behind it were going through was actually really specifically victimizing a number of the people who were involved. So they'd go and do this tickling competition, and then if for whatever reason they offended the person behind it all, then they'd find themselves with a website set up in their name, and they'd find emails going out to employers and schools, and their videos being posted on Pornhub and YouTube and all sorts of places. And so, people were getting their lives not quite destroyed, maybe, but certainly they were on the receiving end of some significant harassment. So, with his passing, that ended, but we still will never really understand what the fuck was going on, which is a shame.
I took it from the film that there must have been. I mean, it's obviously it's speculation, but there must have been a sexual element to it, surely.
I would be staggered if there wasn't. And, I'm no psychologist. He's dead now, so he can't sue me. But I'm going to say there was some pretty repressed homosexuality kind of going on there, which is shit. Like he grew up in an environment and a time, although not so much, but he grew up in an environment and a time where he couldn't be himself.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, that manifested in a really unhealthy way that impacted a lot of other people.
I think those videos, the tickling videos, they do evoke an emotion or evoke something in you, because they made me feel fucking uncomfortable, really on edge watching this happen, and I feel like obviously someone must find that feeling arousing.
Yeah, quite a few people do. So the other thing that I learned is, since I made the film, I still have it, but I had a saved search on for tickled some keywords on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I still check in on it occasionally. And I learned real quick that there's, first of all, quite a lot of tickle porn in the world, and second of all, quite a lot of people on Twitter who are into it and sharing it. So.
Okay, we shall hashtag tickle this.
Yeah. When we were coming out in the States, our distributor wanted to be hashtag tickled, and I was like, before you print that on a poster, I recommend you search it on Twitter, and then you come back and tell me if you think that's still the right idea. And they came back and they're like, oh, yep, not that then. I was like, yeah, hashtag tickled movie.
So, brilliant. But yeah, it's an excellent film. It's really, really good. It's entertaining, but it's full of twists. It's cracking. Really good. I recommend it.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, there's an aspect of the shit that I liked about engaging in conspiracy theory stuff that sort of drew me into that film originally as well, and that was kind of seeing this thing that triggered my bullshit detector.
Mm.
Whereas I saw these ads and these videos, and I was like, "This is bullshit. This is not what it says. This is not what it is." And that sort of thing where I want to go and actually try and understand what it really is. And so that was, the same instinct
Yeah.
at play there. I guess one of the other things I explored sort of in writing the book was why, because there's a whole lot of stuff, and one of the things I really want people to understand when I write about conspiracy theories and talk about conspiracy theories is I want them to understand that the people who are believing these things aren't idiots.
Mm.
And I think it frustrates me when I talk about this stuff online on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and people come back with like, "Look at these fucking idiots. Why would they believe that?" And I'm like, I mean, sure, in a sense, but not like.
Mhm.
And I think it's so there's an aspect. I think there's an aspect of conspiracy theory that freaks me out in the sense that I could and this happens with incels as well.
Mm.
I get a real sense when I look at this stuff. I'm like, fuck, I could so easily have gone in that direction. I could so
Yeah.
easily have bought into this stuff if just for whatever, like, because, some skepticism about what the news tells you or some skepticism about what the government is up to are healthy
Yeah.
Exactly.
and often,
Correct.
often proven reasonable. It's just usually it's not quite as extreme and nor as Machiavellian. It's usually just much stupider.
Yes.
But like, and the incel thing especially. Like, I remember being, a horny virgin teen on the internet in the early to mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, if some people had been telling me this shit that that drives the incel community, if people on the internet had been telling me this shit then, I would have bought into it.
Yeah.
And it freaks me out.
Because it might have resonated. They give you an excuse. They give you support in a strange way. I mean, obviously it's unhealthy, but because it's just sort of refocusing the negative aspects of it. But yeah, you've got a little community going on there, and you've got all these people who are basically very plausibly telling you that it's not your fault.
Yeah, and also you think you're a good guy or a nice guy, and somehow the girls don't care about that. The girls are only interested in
Chads.
the chads, the fuckboys, the whatever you want to call them. And you're like, why don't they understand? And then that builds resentment, and it's like, it's fucked. And I'm just like, so there's an aspect of me that I really don't understand why none of that stuff dug into me in that way. And I put it down to, in a sense, that I've always had this kind of innate bullshit detector and skepticism of big claims without evidence, starting with religion, and then also my parents when I was growing up, when I was sort of in my preteen years. My parents were pretty new agey.
Okay.
We went to the States so they could do a crystal healing workshop when I was like 8. They came back to New Zealand and opened a crystal store. They used to listen to audio tapes of a channeled, a 7,000 or 8,000 year old spirit channeled through a insurance salesman from Florida, I think. Just that regular sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of bark flowers and rescue remedy and shit in my childhood. And there was an aspect of that stuff where I was just like, this is bullshit. And then my parents did Amway, which I think made it worse. I was just like, you're being ripped off.
But you say that, Dylan. I mean, there's certain products that we have to use every day. I mean, you'd agree with that, wouldn't you? I mean, you'd even go so far as to say there's certain products that you probably couldn't live without. And I think that's what's good about Amway, is it provides you with the access to these products every day.
And they're hyper concentrated, and you don't need to use as much of the products. And so actually they're saving you money.
Absolutely.
And you can make it a business for yourself by introducing these excellent products to your friends and family. And the more people you bring in, the more you stand to gain. Let me draw some circles on this whiteboard for you.
Are you saying I could profit from helping others?
Absolutely could. Yes. And as you get more and more downline.
Well, this is win-win.
Ah, brilliant. Yeah, so watching my parents go through that, I was like, this is bullshit. This is ridiculous. And I think whatever was going on in my brain for that and for all the other shit before it, like I write about in the book, I write about like my first memory of like debating religion as like when I was 5, and my friend Cameron, who was a very religious homeschooled boy, was like, I don't know what the fuck game we were playing, but he was like, oh, if you do that, you'll go to hell. And I was like, no, I won't. I don't believe in hell. And then we had a whole existential argument about whether hell was real and whether I could go there if I didn't believe in it. Yeah. So it's like we're in this space for whatever reason. I feel sort of blessed, and there's a there, but for the grace of God go I thing about conspiracy theories, because I've talked to a lot of really intelligent people who are thoughtful, who examine things. They're critical of information that they take in, and yet somehow they land on this other side of the conspiracy theory thing. And they're not stupid people. I mean, they're being duped in a sense, but they're not being duped. They're not like they're not just victims falling for some con artist. They're actually thinking themselves into a place. And I think it's useful to understand that, because otherwise you write everyone off as mentally ill and stupid, and it's like that's not helpful, and it's not true.
Absolutely, yeah, spot on.
Talking of bullshit detectors, I guess this is a good one to employ it on. Today we want to ask the question, did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? Now, this is one of those conspiracy theories that arose spontaneously out of our collective consciousness. The moment we heard a talking head on TV say, Jeffrey Epstein found dead in cell of apparent suicide, I think almost every mouth across the planet said, fuck off. You expect me to believe that? And it is unbelievable. But still, before we start this deep dive, I come from the position of suicide is more likely a possibility than murder. I guess we'll see where we all stand at the end of the episode. I'd like to know where you guys stand before we start.
You told me that we were going to talk about this, and then it completely skipped my mind, and I've done no research, and now I have to remember what I thought about it when I first heard it. And I'm pretty sure I think the same thing, which is like he had a fuck ton to lose, and he was in a bad space and had lost a lot of his, had this lavish lifestyle and was now facing, I guess, the rest of his life in an 8x10 cell or whatever it is. And yeah, like to my mind, it's certainly not even remotely implausible, I think, that he killed himself. But on the flip side, the idea that someone offed him, like he potentially could implicate some people who would not want to be implicated. So, I don't know.
Well, I have to admit, I was firmly in the camp of, no, of course he didn't kill himself. He's very clearly been offed. He's too much of an important figure. Just in as much as basically, like, he's essentially, the most prominent and sort of important prisoner, or whatever you want to call him, like in recent times, and through what would appear to be a cavalcade of errors, coincidences, and mishandlings, this incredibly important person with incredibly potentially damning information on a lot of people somehow manages to escape both justice and scrutiny by dying in a way that draws a line under all of this. The can of worms hasn't even begun to be opened because it's dead. That's slightly mixed metaphor, but you see what I mean. So yeah, I was firmly in the no. Of course, Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. Now, whether that is accurate, we'll see. Basically, just to sort of explain who Jeffrey Epstein is, like we will go into a full explanation, but just in case anybody's going, I've never heard of this fellow. Jeffrey Epstein was a socialite and a supposed billionaire from New York that in the early 2000s befriended a series of prominent figures, including royalty, politicians, movers and shakers in the tech world, and celebrities. And throughout his life, there's been accusations of sexual abuse against children. In the early to mid 2000s, he was arrested and charged with a series of sexual crimes against children, but somehow managed to let's say, escape justice, only for several years later, in 2019, he was arrested again on similar charges, essentially trafficking young girls and using young girls for the purposes of prostitution, only for, on August the 10th, him to be found dead in his cell in a Manhattan prison, seemingly having hung himself and committed suicide. Did he do that? This is what the episode is about. Shall we just dive into it then?
Yeah, I want to hear what the conspiracy theories are.
Absolutely. So just to explain as well, what we're going to do at the beginning is we're going to focus on whether he killed himself. So if anybody's curious to know who Jeffrey Epstein is or the sort of broader conspiracies around him, the context, that is coming up. But first, what we're going to do is we're just going to explain some of the reactions to his death and the theories that sort of abounded from it. And the first video that I saw on this was from Stephen Crowder. Stephen Crowder, I'm not a massive fan of Stephen Crowder, I have to be honest.
I'm not a fan at all.
No.
Let alone massive.
No. I'd like to push him slowly into a massive fan, but I don't think that's the same. Anywho, to be fair to him, this video was quite entertaining. What he's done is he's mocked up a cell, or an area that looks like a cell. It's a bunk bed, essentially. And he's dressed up as Evel Knievel to do the stunt. He's going to recreate Jeffrey Epstein's death by putting a noose around his neck and seeing if he can create sufficient weight and force to break his neck. Now, just to explain, again, we will expand on this, but this is due to one of the main sort of theories as to why people think that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered as opposed to committed suicide. And we'll go into more detail later, but essentially there were certain bones in his neck next to his larynx and his Adam's apple that were fractured. Certain people have postulated the theory that this is more akin to a strangulation homicide than a suicide, and it's more common an injury with homicide, therefore suggesting that there's something really iffy about this. So what Stephen Crowder does is he dresses up as Evel Knievel. He's got a brace around his neck, and then he's got one of those sort of scales, basically, that you used to have in home economics, the pulley ones. And he's decided that he needs to get up to 55 kilograms to be sufficient in order to fracture cartilage. If I'm honest, I've got absolutely no idea where he gets that 55 kilogram data from, because I don't know whether that's an average or whether that's an accurate or whether he's just pulled it out of thin air, to be quite honest.
Or somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's more likely. And this is actually based on the protestations of a guy called Michael Baden, who we will come on to into a minute. He was basically performed or viewed an autopsy, and he's a pathologist, and he suggested that this broken bones was evidence of foul play. Anyway, what Stephen Crowder does is he gets this noose on and he tries a number of different methods to try and get up to the 55 kilograms. And it's a bit of a confused video, really, because he doesn't actually reach that, but then he claims that he probably would have reached that, but the actual device measuring the weight was broken or reset itself or something. So they didn't get a clear sort of what you'd call scientific reading or anything like that, but they still come to the conclusion that basically he thinks that Jeffrey Epstein probably didn't kill himself in the way that it has been suggested. So that was Stephen Crowder, really. I thought it was a valiant effort. If anything, if I've got any advice to Stephen Crowder is, I'd say try that again and try a lot harder. I think that really, put your weight into it, so to speak. I think that,
maybe the neck brace was a problem.
Potentially, but valiant effort. Again, but I would definitely encourage Stephen Crowder to try that again in the near future. So that was literally it, basically, and this comes from discrepancies in as to how Jeffrey Epstein was found. Initially, what it was said was that he was found dead in the cell by guards in the early morning, and he was in a cell on his own, and we'll come to why that is in a second. But there was some discrepancy as to how he'd actually killed himself. Initially, people said that because of the force required to choke himself and to cause those breaks in his throat, he would have had to have thrown himself off the top bunk in order to generate that force. Later, the autopsy said that actually what he'd done was he tied the noose to the lower bunk and he'd simply knelt forward, a bit like D'Angelo supposedly does in The Wire. Like, very, very short, just choked himself through his own weight leaning forward. And if I'm honest, that's never really been cleared up, but we will come to that as we go. The second video that I saw was from James Corbett and the Corbett Report. Now, I have mixed views on. Not a fan.
I'm very familiar with his 9/11 video.
Yeah, as yes, that is one that he's the little 5-minute vignette of one that he's done. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
and I'm forever immortalized in his 7/7 special.
Oh, lovely.
Are you?
Yeah.
How come?
Yeah, my 7/7 spoken word is at the end.
Oh, beautiful.
He closes the show out with it.
Did you get any money for that?
No.
Oh, what a cheapskate.
You should look into licensing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to be fair to James, with this one, he appears to have been ahead of the pack somewhat. And this is a video called Suicided, the Final Days of Jeffrey Epstein. So, he's making it clear in his sort of title that he thinks suicided is a phrase that means basically somebody's been murdered, but in such a way that it would appear to the casual viewer that they've committed suicide. And this is done purely simply as a way to cover up the murder, but is often done in conspiracy law in such a way that it's apparent that the person couldn't have killed themselves. There's a famous idea that people kill themselves by shooting themselves in the head twice. Yeah, like whether that's an actual thing or not, I'm not actually sure. I know of the tropes behind it, but if anything, this podcast has taught me that, yeah, you can't really rely on tropes. But anyway, that's the thing. 2 bullets in the back of the head, committed suicide. On the 8th of July, which was actually 2 days after his arrest, after his secondary arrest in 2019, James Corbett had already gone on his show and made his concerns clear that Jeffrey Epstein would, in inverted commas, commit suicide in his cell. He thought that there's no way that this chap is coming out. And then he was subsequently found dead. Now, what Corbett makes out is that Epstein's not been suicided because he's a good guy, because he's about to sort of whistleblow on the establishment or anything. He's been killed, in his mind, in order to conceal secrets. What these secrets are, we will find out. Essentially, they'll be connected to sex trafficking rings, like potentially using young girls for blackmail against politicians, and basically just the use of young girls, often through modelling agencies, for sex. And so this is the grimness that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in, but we will get to that. So the timeline for his death is that on July the 6th, he's on his way back from Paris in his private jet, and he's actually arrested as soon as he lands at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. And on July the 10th, he's booked as inmate 76318-054 at the Metropolitan Correction Center in Lower Manhattan. A few days later, a couple of weeks later, on July the 23rd, apparently Jeffrey Epstein has what is considered his first suicide attempt. Now, at this point, details are very, very sketchy. James Corbett doesn't know who was involved in it, but seemingly he was put in a cell with another guy, a big strapping guy. And about sort of 1:30 in the afternoon, guards walk past and see him lying on the floor, clearly in distress. The cellmate claims that he's tried to kill himself and that he saved his life. Epstein claims that the cellmate actually attacked him. The guards, basically, they don't know what's happened. Some of them think that he might have been attacked. Some of them think that he might have tried to commit suicide. Some think that he might have been sort of faking suicide in an attempt to get out of this cell with this person, or even a private cell on his own, basically. But what's interesting is within 6 days of this supposed suicide attempt, Jeffrey Epstein was taken off suicide watch, which some people, including James Corbett, think is highly unusual. Somebody that is such a high-profile prisoner, somebody that's shown suicidal tendencies,
was taken off suicide watches. What suicide watches is basically you're monitored all the time, so that if you attempt to commit suicide, somebody will rush in and stop you from doing it. So he's put on what's called special observation, which means that guards are supposed to check on him every 30 minutes, but evidently this doesn't happen. On August the 9th, thousands of documents are released pertaining to a lawsuit that's coming out from a girl called Virginia Roberts, or later she's named Virginia Giuffre because she gets married. And in these documents, it seems to imply that Jeffrey Epstein has provided sexual favors for several prominent people, including Prince Andrew, a Democratic senator called George Mitchell, and a Democratic governor called Bill Richardson. And so all of this is swirling around in the press. And on the same day, for reasons that haven't been fully explained, Epstein's cellmate is removed from his cell, leaving him in a double cell on his own. The following morning, Jeffrey Epstein is found dead. Now, what Corbett makes out is because he seemingly hung himself with sheets, what he did was he wrapped these sheets round, folded them up, made them into a noose, tied it to something, and seemingly hung himself off of this. But Corbett says that he doesn't believe that this is in any way plausible because the sheets would have been of such poor quality to prevent this very thing from happening. And he actually quotes a former MCC inmate who says, "There's no way Epstein killed himself. I've done so much time in these units. It's an impossibility. Between the floor and the ceiling, it's like an 8 or 9 foot drop. There's no way to connect anything. You have sheets, but they're paper level. They're not strong enough. He was a 200-pound man. That would never happen. Could he have done it from the bed? No, sir. There's a steel frame, but you can't move it." So Corbett basically wants to know, what we know. And to be fair to him, he actually addresses some of the sort of sillier things that are surrounding this, the death. For example, as soon as pictures of Jeffrey Epstein came out, there was a picture of him seemingly dead on a gurney being loaded into the back of a hospital. And immediately the internet lit up by saying, that's not a real hospital, it's a fake set, or that's not Jeffrey Epstein, it doesn't look like him, because compared to this picture of him standing up 20 years ago.
The ears were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. The ears were wrong.
It's always the ears.
Yeah. But to be fair to Corbett, he actually basically says, no, he doesn't buy any of this at all. He's been on Google Maps, and this is definitely what the back of the hospital looks like. And he also points out that when people die, fluids shift. And we also don't know the nature of the injuries that Epstein sustained. So he could have damaged his nose or his ears or whatever in the suicide attempt. So he really doesn't buy any of that explanation that this is a fake corpse, which is pretty good of James Corbett. Like you have to hand it to him on that one. He's dismissed some of the more wacky things offhand. He brings up Michael Baden. Now, Michael Baden was a private pathologist that was basically allowed to examine the body on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, and his lawyers, his estate, essentially. Now, Michael Baden is the person that says that he thinks that there's some foul play has gone off. He says that there's hemorrhaging in the eyes that's consistent with being strangled. There's breaks to the hyoid bone next to the larynx, which he also says are more consistent with being garroted from behind rather than actually hanging. There are certain other things which we'll come into later. But again, to give James Corbett his due, he immediately says, although this looks like a very, very powerful piece of evidence from Michael Baden has been involved in certain things before that suggest that potentially he will move and sway however the people who pay him feel that is best. And what he points out is that Michael Baden was actually part of the Warren Commission, so the investigation into JFK. Now, this makes it very, very difficult for conspiracy theorists because Michael Baden was the person that suggested that the bullet hole in the front of JFK's throat was an entrance wound, was an exit wound. Just to explain, the theory was that he was shot in the front of the throat, which would mean that somebody were probably shot him from, I don't know, if you're into physics, to quote Bill Hicks, over there, in that sort of the grassy knoll area, like we'll call it a knoll, that sort of grassy hillock over there. That would seem to be from where the shot came. But no, apparently, according to Michael Baden, this was an exit wound, which would mean that he was shot from directly behind, which would mean that the official story was correct. Now, nobody seems to have pointed out that wouldn't that involve the bullet going directly through JFK's spine? But let's not get bogged down with that.
That's a different episode.
Yeah.
That's a very different episode. But the point being that even James Corbett raises the point that although Michael Baden may well be telling the truth, he seems to be, and I quote Corbett, he seems to be a pathologist for hire who will spin things any way the client wants. So, although that is strong evidence, powerful evidence, or compelling on the surface, Corbett errs on the side of caution. He also talks about messages that appeared on 4chan, and basically this was 40 minutes before the death of Epstein was announced. Yes, 4chan. I appreciate that. What this message on 4chan said was not saying anything after this, but please do not try and dox me. But last night at 4:15 count, they took him medical in a wheelchair, front cuffed, but not one triage nurse says that they spoke to him. Next thing we know, a van shows up. We do not do releases on weekends unless a judge orders it. And the next thing we know, he's put in a single-man cell and hangs himself. Here's the thing. The trip van did not sign in and we did not record the plate number. And a guy in a green dress military outfit was in the back of the van, according to the tower guy who let him through the gate. Guys, I'm shaking right now, but I think they switched him out. Right, okay, now this is interesting because basically this was 40 minutes before the announcement of Jeffrey Epstein's death by the mainstream media. Somebody seemed to have a bit of a prior knowledge of it in order to make the post. But what they've said is that they think that he wasn't murdered, it was all faked, and he's basically been banged into the back of a truck, and he's now living at large with Elvis and Tupac on that island, wherever it is. Like, that's going to be an interesting island. Like, it's like conversation would be interesting. Like, the entertainment in the evening would be astonishing.
It would be sick. Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Wouldn't it? Just like, so... Unfortunately, and again, give Corbett his due, he points out that although that is very, very coincidental, another 4chan message from the seemingly the same poster came up about 20 minutes later, basically saying, yeah, guys, I was joking. It's just a joke. I was only joking. So,
right.
Again, to be fair to Corbett, what he seems to be doing is sort of dismissing the wackier elements of the theory outright. But then he points out that basically there's something that we do need to be concerned about, that there's no CCTV video. For some reason, the CCTV that covers the outside of the cell where Epstein supposedly killed himself failed. He also basically says that he was taken off suicide watch at his lawyer's request, which is unusual. He says that prison guidelines require an explanation for this, and at the time of him recording this, he says that's just not come out. And he says that a program coordinator would have to do a face-to-face evaluation on Epstein, and as far as Corbett can see, this never happened. So it's very, very strange why he was taken off suicide watch. Even though he wasn't on suicide watch, he was supposed to be closely monitored and checked every 30 minutes. And according to prison protocol, he was supposed to have a cellmate. Like, prisoners aren't supposed to be left alone after suicide watch, and this, according to Corbett, actually violated the prison's normal procedures. He points out that the previous suicide attempt on July the 23rd, the cellmate who saved him or tried to kill him, depending on who you listen to, was an ex-cop called Nicholas Tartaglione. And what's interesting about Nicholas Tartaglione, built like an absolute barn door, massive, great bodybuilding looking guy, like great butch Omi, to use the parlance. And he's actually killed 4 men because he was involved in a cocaine ring, one of them by strangulation. Ooh. Exactly. There you go. That's definitely something. And also, Corbett points out that, strangely, Tartaglione had a cell phone in prison. So what he's inferring here is that basically Tartaglione is maybe got an order from somebody or something like that, and that the CCTV has failed, and then somehow Jeffrey Epstein, this massively highly prominent prisoner, has wound up dead. Now, the main proponent of the actual theory, or the main sort of source of the theory, is a chap called Michael Baden. Michael Baden was the pathologist. He's not the official pathologist that carried out the autopsy. He was hired by Mark Epstein, who's Jeffrey Epstein's brother, to oversee it and to basically see what his opinion is on the death of Jeffrey Epstein. And the first thing that he says is he points out that Epstein was only 84 kilograms. And he wonders if he had sufficient weight to strangle himself leaning forward. He also basically says that if he threw himself off the top bunk, which is what the initial theory was regarding his death, how come, and this was revealed in photographs of the cell directly after the body was found, how come there's a series of bottles and medicines and pill bottles all neatly lined up on the top bunk? If somebody had thrown themselves off that bunk with enough force, surely they would have been disturbed. They would have fallen over. At least some of them would. And so he points to the scene of the crime as to suggest that it would be very, very difficult for somebody to throw themselves off the top bunk without disturbing this. He also points out that in the room itself, there were other things that would be better suited for a suicide. There was a tube for a sleep apnea machine, and there were wires, basically like a plug, essentially, for this machine, which was stronger, and they're actually longer than the sheets. And so he questions why Epstein didn't use these instead of the sheet. On October the 30th, 2019, Baden issued a report that said the neck injuries in his client were more consistent with homicidal strangulation than suicide. He said there were 2 fractures on the left and right of the larynx, and 1 fracture on the hyoid bone, which is above the Adam's apple. And he says that basically, in looking at prison suicides over the last 40 to 50 years, he'd never seen an incident of prison suicide where anybody had these 3 fractures in the throat. And so he strongly points towards believing this to be evidence that foul play happened. He also points out that the neck wound on Epstein's body was actually in the center of the throat. It was not slipping to go under the mandibles. So it was basically just down here along the Adam's apple where you would wear a choker, rather than, he suggests that normally basically the bruising would all be under the jaw because that's where the weight would carry the body. He also says that there was lots of blood on the neck, but there was no blood on the noose. And this is very, very sort of confusing to Michael Baden. And this is a pathologist, as I say. This is actually, a genuine pathologist that has dealt with lots of cases in the past. So that was considered to hold quite a lot of weight, particularly in the conspiracy world, that this person would be a figure of authority and somebody whose opinion you could actually take seriously. Whether this is the case, we'll find out in a little bit, basically. Did Epstein kill himself thing really became sort of a bit ubiquitous. Everybody sort of kind of was mentioning it, as Brent said at the beginning. It was just one of these things that had happened, and the general feeling in the alternative media and to a degree in the mainstream as well, was
Yeah. I think in the mainstream, a lot of people were just like, no chance. People at work were saying it. They're not even conspiracists.
Yeah, Ricky Gervais even mentioned it, didn't he?
60 Minutes in the US did a story on it as well, using Michael Baden, I think.
Yeah, no, and entirely they did. Yeah, various people did. I think 60 Minutes Australia did as well, actually, and various outlets, because it did seem very, certainly convenient.
Yeah.
Now, whether it was convenient, but that was the.
It's painted as being convenient.
Yeah, because all of a sudden, this potential sort of dynamite situation it's just gone away. Dead men tell no tales is the idiom, so to speak. But Now, what was interesting was that on the day of Epstein's death, Trump, he tweeted out hashtag Clinton body count, which,
Oh my god!
Wow.
as the president of the United States of America, is probably not the most responsible thing that one could do. But this is what he did. Why would Donald Trump do that? Would Donald Trump have a reason to deflect away from his own sort of intimate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Who can say? Well, we'll explore it as we go on. So the person who basically seemed to take the most credit, shall we say, for Epstein was our good friend and not crazy person at all, Alex Jones of InfoWars. And he's made a series of claims about Jeffrey Epstein, so we'll explore it. But the most sort of complete video that he's done on this is called Epstein Was Murdered and the Cover-Up is Unraveling. He starts this video off by saying, "It's official. Epstein was murdered. The evidence is incontrovertible. There isn't a jury in the land with all this evidence that wouldn't say he was murdered. And there is an ongoing cover-up that is unraveling." So Alex is basically, expressing in very sort of, emotive terms what everyone's concerned about. That
Could you read that again, but make your neck veins pop right out?
It's official. No, I can't do it. I just no.
It's too early for
no.
that.
It is. It's bloody early here still, mate. So, but to highlight this as well, he shows on screen a headline that says "Autopsy finds broken bones in Epstein's neck, deepening questions around his death," which is the thing that we've spoken about. The hyoid bone's been broken. And Alex Jones says that the autopsy says that his neck was broken in 2 places. Now, this isn't strictly true. It was fractured, but, those words can be interchangeable. You could accuse Alex of, exaggerating, hyping stuff up. But, I mean, I don't know whether that's really in his character. So I don't know whether that would be fair to lay that on the door of Alex Jones. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt anyway. So he then shows another headline, which is based on Michael Bailey, saying that injuries are more common in victims of strangulation than hanging. And just to clarify his position on it, he says that nobody believed this paedophile pimp blackmail procurer Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. And so just to explain, as we will expand, the theory was that Jeffrey Epstein not only had a penchant himself for young girls that he would traffic and exploit, but that also he would somehow use these young girls to lure and tempt prominent members of the establishment that he was friends with, people like Clinton and people like Prince Andrew, and people recently suggested, say, people like Bill Gates and stuff like that. The theory was that he was in some way blackmailing these people with the use of these very attractive young girls, and recording them, essentially clandestinely recording them, and then using these sex tapes as collateral for blackmail. And that was the theory that Alex Jones is speaking about.
A bit like a piss tape, yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, like a sort of Russian compromat thing. Yeah, very much like that. Yeah. I mean, again, like, why Trump would be so keen to sort of distance himself from Epstein? It's one of those things that at this juncture we simply don't know. Let's see if there's anything that comes. Yeah. But Alex then basically goes, there's a whole list of inconsistencies, and he basically says that these are actually from an article in Drudge Report, so it's not his own, but he agrees with them. And he says that the first one was something called a sweetheart deal. And he says that in 2008, Epstein was charged with sex trafficking by the FBI that linked him to the Clintons and the Obama administration and to Haiti. And so what he's saying there is to basically, again, there's a trope within the conspiracy world that Haiti, for some reason, is this sort of hotbed of, it's where Hillary Clinton goes to choose, like, young girls, like she's picking shoes out of a catalogue, and then somehow they get them back to America and they abuse them, possibly through tunnels or something like that. But this is what Alex is inferring basically happened. Second, he says they put him in with this huge bodybuilder ex-cop who murdered 4 drug dealers, and his speciality is shooting and choking people to death. And this is the Mark Tartaglione. And he shows the headline, Epstein feared cellmate, muscle-bound ex-cop. And this is true, actually. Apparently, well, not necessarily he feared his cellmate, but he'd certainly made noises to his lawyer and his brother that he was, let's say, concerned that he was in jail. Now, whether this was just sort of a general, normal, natural concern for being in jail, or whether there was something more specific, isn't really clear, to be quite honest. So Alex says, basically, this guy, his cellmate, this cop, he tried to break Epstein's neck, but good guards, not on the take, they got in and they stopped him. And he says that Epstein apparently told his lawyer that Nick, who was his cellmate, tried to kill him. And this is what Alex says. He says they put him on suicide watch, they take him off suicide watch, they put him in a cell by himself, and they pull the regular guards, giving opportunity to have him murdered. So, the discrepancies that apparently Alex Jones has found in this Drudge Report article are that Epstein said that he would cooperate and he would begin naming names. 2, he was found unconscious 3 weeks earlier. 3, documents implicating top Democrats had come out on the day before he died. 4, he was taken off suicide watch. 5, he was isolated, which is strange for a suicidal inmate. 6, that the camera malfunctioned. 7, that we hear that the guards didn't do the rounds and check on him. 8, that the guards had worked several extra shifts and so were perhaps not in peak condition. 1 guard was not actually a certified guard. The guards forgot to check on him. The guards slept through their shift. There was a period of 3 hours where no check at all was done on Jeffrey Epstein. Alex points out that he says that he's heard reports of screaming from the cell. He points out that the cellmate had tried to murder him and that the cellmate is actually a convicted murderer. He wonders why he wasn't given paper sheets, and he says that Epstein definitely had dirt on global elites, but he told people that he wasn't suicidal, and he'd actually told his lawyers, I'll see you on Saturday. And so these are 21 discrepancies that Alex Jones points out that he suggests points to foul play as opposed to suicide. And this is his actual key point. He says, we heard him screaming and yelling and fighting for his life, and the guards were mocking him, trying to cover up the screaming, saying, breathe, breathe, Epstein, as they were murdering him. So this is a report that he's heard, that from the cell there was screaming and shouting and yelling, and the guards were saying, breathe, Epstein, breathe. He also points out that, again, that his neck was broken in 2 places, and he says that the evidence points to murder and that he had a little black book. And this is true. There's a fabled little black book that some think is like a list of clients or sort of an insight into his potential paedophile ring or the types of people that he was knocking about with that he may well have dirt on. And he also points out that basically he was a pimp, says Alex. This is a slightly more bold statement from Alex Jones. He says, in New York, they do drugs and have rituals. It's about eugenics and trauma-based mind control. Now, I don't know whether he's sort of referring to New York in general. I think he's referring just to Epstein and Epstein's circle in New York. I don't think it's like on that I Love New York t-shirt. I don't think on the back it says we have drugs and rituals and trauma-based mind control. So I think it is.
I've been to New York. There's definitely the drugs and rituals. And maybe only if you land at JFK, though. I think if you come in through the other airports, you might not get it.
LaGuardia's.
LaGuardia, not so much.
Ah,
Yeah.
There we go then. He says that all the default protections were turned off. We know that he said somebody already tried to kill him in his cell. That's been on the news. So they move him in with someone else, then into a cell by himself. And there's a camera over the cell that malfunctioned. They tell all the guards to go home an hour early. People heard screaming and shouting for his life. screaming, begging, and howling for his life. And Alex said that the list that came out, the document that had come out that day, showed loads of top Democrats and royalty, and that implies that Clinton is involved in this paedophile ring. And then he says that we know that Hillary Clinton and Bill both went to the island 27 times for Bill. What he's referring to here is an island called Little St. James. It's a Caribbean island that basically Epstein bought, and he's got a home there. It's a private island, and supposedly he took people there, and he would always have a cadre of girls there. And this sort of ties in with the theory that this was potentially a place where people were being abused and or blackmailed. And Jones basically says, well, he was worried that he'd been murdered, and he says that people were filming Epstein Island with drones, and that you could see that basically banks of computers that were seen through the windows were not there, were not recovered by the FBI. And so he suggests that not only was he murdered, but at the same time there was a simultaneous cover-up going along where any evidence of this potential plot was being sort of like, taken away. Now, Alex then basically says that this comes somewhat out of nowhere, basically. But what he says, and he wants to make absolutely clear, was that he says he trusts Trump because he's vetted Trump. And there's no connection or suggestion that Trump has been involved with anything or anybody that has any connection to any paedophile that he knows. And that's why he trusts Trump.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
He's done his research.
He's done his own research, and so he's confident in Trump. But then he basically says there was absolutely no connection between Epstein and Trump. And so this again informs his trust of Donald Trump. And then he basically makes the claim that basically he broke the Epstein story. He's the person that very first sort of brought this to the attention of not the world per se, but the alternative media. But he kind of implies that everybody knew that this was a bit of an open secret. He says, I'd love to say I broke this, but everybody knew. But then he sort of goes back on that and says that Epstein was involved in ritual human sacrifice, and I've been saying this for over 10 years, so implying that basically, why has nobody been listening to me? I've been telling you about Epstein and his ritual sacrifices and his drugs and rituals in New York for years. And this, he's basically saying at this point 10 years, so that would be 2009 that he's saying at this point he was telling people about Epstein. And it's not the only time he's made the claim. He's made loads and loads of claims. He goes on a thing called Drinking Bros, which is a sort of, a podcast. And they sort of really heavily praising Alex Jones. They basically say, wow, Alex, you broke the story about Epstein. You're the person that first mentioned Jeffrey Epstein. And he says in this, well, I knew about Epstein 20 years ago, which would be 1999. So Alex Jones claims that he knew and had spoken about Jeffrey Epstein as early as 1999. And he says, the articles about this group of billionaires wanting to save the world with Warren Buffett and Ted Turner and Bill and Melinda Gates and all these others, the only black person is Oprah Winfrey. But they were meeting in New York to create an alternative world government to save the world from overpopulation. So I first saw his name involved in eugenics, and years later when it came out, I said that he'd been running secret breeding programs and weird hospitals and facilities, and the cover was these rich guys having sex with young girls. And what they're actually having, they're actually having their kids. I can't figure out what for. It's like an ego thing. Our genetics is so good that we've got to have babies and we'll promote them in the culture. It's an elitist thing to sire secret kids. And so what Alex is kind of inferring here is that the paedophile ring, such as it is that's been implied, was actually a cover for a eugenics program in which basically they wanted to sort of sire legions of their own offspring to be put into secret places around the world. And it makes sense. If you wanted to cover something up and avoid scrutiny, the best tried and tested method to do that is to implicate an elitist paedophile ring. People always ignore that, don't they? That's guaranteed for people to go, oh, turn the other way and look at that. So I'm not sure about that one, Alex. Like, but is there any truth to what he says? Well, we'll find out. Then basically he turns up outside Google.
Oh, this video is hilarious.
Beg your pardon, Alex Jones does.
Yes.
Yeah, he turns
right.
outside Google's sort of headquarters or whatever. And what he's angry about is the sort of mashing together of Pizzagate, which he heavily promoted, and Epstein and the idea of Hillary Clinton. And what he's there really to promote is to say that he doesn't believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, but that Google are covering up the connections that he has to the Clinton family. And basically, I mean, he starts off by saying, I started talking about Epstein 13 years ago running blackmail rings, which would mean, again, that sort of like in the early 2000s that he's talking about this.
Have we had Alex Jones claim 10 years, 20 years, and 13 years now? Is that?
We have, yes,
Okay,
yes,
cool.
yes.
Just making sure I've got the timeline.
I would point out as well that some of these claims, he claims to have known about Epstein before his first arrest. Which is interesting, certainly. But again, let's not get bogged down with facts. Let's So he says, I started talking about Epstein 13 years ago, running blackmail rings. And then he makes the point, he says, Pizzagate. Because if you remember, what Pizzagate was this idea that this pizza shop in Washington, D.C. had been exposed by some emails that came out from John Podesta that were written in code that suggested that there was a child sex ring going on. Now, the major sort of plot point that led me to believe immediately that this was total bollocks was that the code itself didn't work. If you applied, it was supposed to be like cheese pizza was supposed to be this, and like handkerchief was supposed to be a boy, and walnut was supposed to be a girl, or whatever this. And if you actually overlaid those words, which was over these messages, which was supposed to be an expose, it was utter nonsense gobbledygook. Not a single one of those messages actually made any sense. But Alex Jones very heavily pushed this. He said that it was real. He says that the Clintons were involved. He says that I forget the person who worked at Comet Pizza, Alephantis, I think was his name.
James Alephantis.
James Alephantis, right? Okay. And in no way was there an undercurrent of homophobia about this. It was simply Alex Jones following the investigation that just so happened to smear the rival of the political entity that he was being paid to promote as part of his campaign. But let's not, let that colour our view of Alex Jones. He says that the media spun something about a pizza place instead of the WikiLeaks that was specifically about Jeffrey Epstein and child kidnapping rings and blackmailing the Clintons. So he's saying that not only did he have nothing to do with Pizzagate, which is a complete lie, he was one of the main proponents of Pizzagate, but that Pizzagate was actually spun by the mainstream media to hide the fact that the WikiLeaks emails actually showed that Jeffrey Epstein was supplying the Clintons, both Hillary and Bill Clinton, with young girls, and then was blackmailing them. And then he shows Amy Robach, who's a reporter on ABC News, and this was broken actually by Project Veritas, and it shows her like in an off-air hot mic moment saying that we had the Epstein story, and it's basically, it implies that somebody's covered something up. And she says, I've tried for 3 years to get this out to no avail, and now these revelations, I freaking had all of it. We had everything, Clinton, all of it. And this is shown basically to show that again, people were aware of this, but for whatever reason, the mainstream media didn't want to actually touch the story. And Alex suggests it's because basically it was connected to the Clintons. So that's the theory. That is the theory surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. The strong contention is that basically he wasn't. He was murdered. That there's far too many sort of coincidences that have happened. Just to sort of clarify, basically what the sort of order was he was arrested in 2019. He was moved into a cell. Quite early on, he was found in a state of distress. The chap that he was in the cell with says that he saved his life. He says that he was attacked. The guards weren't quite sure. Now, what happened was the CCTV outside this cell failed. It completely failed, and so there's no footage that indicates anything that could be helpful. Later, this footage was actually found
Oh.
and then lost.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, at this point, Epstein was put on suicide watch, and so was being monitored daily. I think he was still in the cell with the same guy, as far as I can see. 6 days later, he's taken off suicide watch, and he's put in a cell on his own, and basically he's sort of left to his own devices. He's supposed to be checked every 30 minutes. This doesn't happen. And on August the 10th, he's found dead in his cell in the morning by the guards. Now, again, 2 CCTV cameras this time failed outside his room. So if anybody was to go into his cell, we would have no evidence of that. And the 2 guards fell asleep. Both of them fell asleep at the same time, leaving a 3-hour gap where he wasn't checked. And rightly, people think that this is, at best, slapdash, at worst, incredibly suspicious.
That is a lot of stuff to have to swallow.
Isn't it?
Like, that is a lot.
To be honest, I think it's open and shut. So good stuff, guys. Nice chat, and yeah.
Well, this is the thing. You can certainly see why people would raise the concerns. As I say, I immediately went, "Oh, come on! The CCTV failed, and then he's taken off suicide watch, and then the guards fall asleep, and the cameras fail again, and then he's found dead." It's very, very convenient.
It is just too much from a conspiracist's mind.
Yes,
Like, that is a lot.
It is a lot
to just have to say was a coincidence or
a calamity.
It's a very solid coincidence theory.
Well, this is the thing. Like, what I was saying again, particularly as we started this investigation, was like, oh, come on, there's far too many things. Are they like, you can put it down to incompetence to a degree, but there's so many incompetencies within this that it does stack up to the point where you think, hang on, I can certainly see why people would be taken by this particular theory.